house, in ruins. The tree had grown up through the floor of it, and a good portion of the handholds leading up the trunk had withered or fallen off. Sammy knew that there was no way he was going to get up there, so he continued. He spotted a rusty black key sitting on a horizontal gravestone. This must be for the iron gate in the cornfield, he thought. He scooped up the key and went back through the silo and into the cornfield, heading for the gate. Sammy saw that the sky had become a deep navy blue and there were twinkling white stars in it. He fitted the key into the padlock and turned it. The padlock cracked off and the gate opened with a loud, creaking squeak of the hinges, and a deep ambience started up from nowhere in particular. Sammy shuddered and walked through the gate, seeing a graveyard with more of the tombstones like the one he saw earlier, only some were standing upright instead of laying flat. He saw a church house, and he felt that this was where he needed to go next. He walked towards the church and saw that the doors were shut, however they were not locked. Sammy entered the church and surveyed the room. There were 2 rows of wooden pews, all facing an altar, which was up on a short ledge. Sammy saw some pieces of baby dolls in a crooked cluster on the floor in front of the altars, and he marked them as evidence and put them in his bag. A loud slamming sound was heard from behind him, and Sammy whipped his head around, for fear of the bony figure he encountered in the cellar. Instead, there was the Shadow Man, standing tall and powerful, in front of the doors, which were now closed. Shadow Man stood there for a few seconds before glitching away and leaving Sammy in silence. Sammy walked up to another door and tried to open it, but it was locked as well. But all of a sudden, the door burst open and something lunged into the room. Sammy jumped back to see what it was, and realized that it was a Who. He'd seen him before. It was the skeletal figure from the cellar. Sammy could get a complete view of him now, in the dim light of the church. He was surprisingly tall, though not as tall as the Shadow Man. He was at least as tall as Sammy himself, if not shorter by a few inches. His hair was long, dark, and matted, and his skin was pulled tight across his bones, no muscle or fat visible at all. He was wearing nothing but a tattered loincloth and an ugly sneer. He was missing his lower jaw, his nose was badly wrinkled and bent upwards, the skin under his nose was shriveled, and his head slowly swiveled around as his dark, shadowy eyes were scanning the room, finally fixating on Sammy. Sammy shakily turned and started to run towards a corridor that led to the altar on the ledge. He could hear swift footsteps behind him, as well as a shrieking moan or cry of some sort, and he knew that the creature had given chase. Jumping up on the altar, Sammy fled through the now open door and charged headlong towards to a house that he realized could only belong to the Mansons. He could hear the footsteps fading behind him, though, and he was thankful that the bony being had stopped following him, or otherwise lost his trail. Sammy entered the house and surveyed the ruined wallpaper and broken furniture. He found a note left possibly by a child, to another child, though it proved little evidence. Sammy kept the note with him anyway and found some steps leading upstairs. He walked up to them, and saw they led to the attic. He found a few more drawings, but what was the most shocking of all was a letter. "What's wrong with this place? Why did this happen to us? No answers anywhere I look. Am I crazy? These things I see at night. I don't know what to think. Ever since Connor disappeared and Diane left. I must have hit a breaking point. I still keep looking. I still hear him sometimes, that cute little laugh. But he's been gone for 9 years. Why does every day have to hurt so much? Connor Sr." It was then that Sammy understood. That skeletal creature was Connor. He had been abducted by the Shadow Man at a young age, but now he's a teenager and he had been starved beyond recognition. He's been living at this farmstead for so long now, and all the horrible things Shadow Man did to him, turned him into that. And he's still alive. Good Lord, Sammy thought in horror. He stumbled backward against a table, his hand on his head. This can't be. This can't be real. He could feel himself really sweating now, feeling it even start up in his armpits. That was Connor. Sammy took a shaky breath, trying to get his bearings. Then he took 2 steps forward and fell through a hole in the ground, unbeknownst to him. He landed with a thump and gasped in surprise, for he heard the sound of running feet again. Maybe I can try to reason with him, Sammy thought. He started towards the source of the sounds, and the bony human that was Connor Manson Jr. dashed out from around the corner and charged at him. Okay, he's beyond reasoning. Sammy turned and ran. He fled from the back doorway and headed down the path. He did not dare to stop or even slow, as Connor was right behind him. He felt his video camera slip out of his grasp and fall on the ground in front of him, but he didn't stop to pick it up. He could feel Connor take a swipe at his head, feel his fingernails dig deep, but he didn't stop to tend to it. He could feel him strike a part of his brain that caused him to suddenly lose part of his sanity, coupled with all the stress that he was going through, but he didn't stop for that, either. He just ran. Sammy collapsed onto the metal wall of the storage building, panting in agony. He had 3 cramps in each of his sides and was hyperventilating hard, but he was grateful that Connor hadn't gotten to him yet. He shakily pulled out a piece of paper and began scribbling on it frantically. Outside, he wrote, "I need to die before